If you've been around for a while, then you know how much I care about financial freedom for all. One thing that often gets in the way of that is debt. That's why I'm happy to announce that I've partnered with an amazing organization called Juno. Juno helps you get lower interest rates by using the power of group negotiation. It is a completely free resource that you can use to secure lower interest rates on new and existing student loans. Head to the link in the episode show notes to find out more. This is the Dreamers Podcast, episode 49. Today is December 21st, 2021.
Hello, world. Welcome to the Dreamers Podcast. I am Stephanie Anne-Lyse, also known as Anne-Lyse Wealth. I am a financial coach and an author. I self-published my first book, Dream of Legacy, a guide to help dreamers reach financial independence and build generational wealth. In this podcast, I'll have conversations with experts and thought leaders who dare to follow their dreams. You'll hear about their journey and their money stories. I hope it inspires you, dreamers out there, to live life on your own terms.
Come on, dreamers, let's change the world!
This podcast is brought to you by Dream of Legacy. Check out dreamoflegacy.com for resources to assist you on your journey to financial independence. Before we get into today's episode, please take a couple minutes to go into Apple Podcasts if you're listening from an Apple device to rate and review the podcast. If you appreciate the free resources that are provided in this podcast, then the best way to let me know is to do just that. Reviews help the podcast be more visible and it helps other dreamers discover the podcast. So thank you. I appreciate you. And now let's get back to today's episode. Hello. Welcome to the Dreamers Podcast. I'm your host, Anne-Lyse Wealth. And this is the second to last episode before the end of the year. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. This is a different episode. It's actually a medley of our most popular episodes and the lessons learned from each of them. And I hope you enjoy it. And I hope it also gives you kind of like a starting point to go back and listen to older episodes. If you are an OG listener, I'm so glad that you're here today. And thank you for continuing to support the podcast. We are a few days away from Christmas. For anyone who celebrates Christmas, I can't believe that the year is coming to an end. I've been reflecting about 2021. It's been a very challenging year for many of us. But, I like to always think about the positive that happened. And I hope that you take this time to do the same. As we officially kick off the last 2 weeks of the year, I have put together some amazing clips from previous episodes, and I hope that they speak to you as much as they speak to me and motivate me to continue to pursue the dream. I hope you enjoy the best-ofs from this season, and if you haven't listened to these episodes yet, I suggest that you go back and check them out. I will make sure to include the episode reference in the show notes. If you celebrate Christmas, I wish you a Merry Christmas. I hope you get to spend the holidays with your family. I cannot wait to see you back here next week.
I think I first started to understand about money really pretty much at a young age because the school I went to was very, very prestigious and very, very expensive. But I was there on scholarship because I was very smart. And so I understood right away the difference between my class level, so to speak, and that of my peers. And it was at that moment that I knew there were levels to this life, right? There were levels to money. I became very cognizant of the struggles my mom had and then the struggles that my friends' moms didn't have. So it made me very aware at that time that I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't even know what that meant, but I always knew I wanted to have a business because I saw having my own as a way of controlling my money situation. And I saw it as a way I could pay my mom, pay my dad, help them to not have to work. And that's always been my motivation and still is my motivation. So I would say that that's really when I first began to understand money and the difference experiences that people have with money and how money works. So that was really key. And I went to that school from age 9 to 18. So it's really shaped my identity.
So those experiences from an early age opened up your mind to the possibilities that were out there if you actually started your own business.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's just amazing how
Our experiences as kids
really, really impact our views on life.
Mm-hmm.
It's just amazing that you were able to have that opportunity early on to realize what else was out there. Because oftentimes you'll just be exposed to your environment and you won't know the possibilities. And that's just the mindset is so important when it comes to building wealth, knowing, okay, there is more than what I'm used to. And once you know that, it just really opens you up to what you can do.
Exactly.
What kind of financial education did you have as a kid? I know you mentioned that you learned about the differences between your classmates and yourself, but what about money education?
Well, I actually didn't receive much financial literacy education. My parents, no fault to their own, but I think when you don't know what you don't know, you can't teach it. So I always had a job. Like I started working from 16 because I always wanted to have my own money. And again, I always understood money as being a way that you can elevate your own circumstance and the circumstance of your family. So I always understood that, but I didn't learn about credit, investing, any of that until college, and then more so until I got married, which happened at about age 20. So I did get married really young, and I think that kind of ushered me into real life. So I began to educate myself about all of these things. But in addition, my financial literacy growth journey started as an adult. But that's something I'm going to do differently with my kids, is they're going to know these things from a young age. Sometimes families don't talk about money because they don't have money, but we have to recognize that understanding how money works, understanding how to invest, how to have a business, how to save, how to budget, your credit. These things should be common knowledge. Money should not be a privilege. It should just be standard, in my opinion.
I totally agree. I think the sooner we teach kids about money, the better off they will be. Like you said, you can't teach what you don't know. Once you do know, a lot of times we don't take the time to teach them. We really have to do that because that will help them in the future.
Your credit is a journey because life is a journey. And I don't want anyone to feel that their credit defines who they are. And we oftentimes can get stuck in that. So I'm going to share two stories. The first one is when my credit score was a 303, I used to hear this credit repair commercial on the radio all the time for a credit repair service. And I signed up. And there was one positive account that I had on my credit report, and that was an auto loan that my mother paid off. Some kind of way, they was able to remove that from my credit report. So it was not beneficial. It didn't help me at all. It made my credit a lot worse. And I was working at a car dealership at the time, and I saw how people were treated with good credit versus how people were treated with bad credit. I remember the guy in the finance department, me asking him, like, I want to be like them. I want to be treated with, I want to have that red carpet experience. And he said that you need to get your credit together. And I said, well, I currently pay the company. They're not doing anything. He said, well, do it yourself. He was literally go down to the library and study the Fair Credit Reporting Act. That was my first time ever hearing about that. Went down to the library that next day, and I just fell in love with all of the information. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that this was even possible. So I began to work on my credit, and I went from a 303 to a 650 in 6 months. I went and got a secured credit card, and from there, my credit score ended that 8th month at like a 710 or so. So I went and purchased a new vehicle. And then I ended up losing my job, and it put me back into a financial bind of me not being able to pay my bills. And that is what made me say, you know what, I'm not going back to work. I started to have a great passion, correcting inaccuracies on credit reports and helping people, that I said, I'm going to turn this into a job or into a business. And in the midst of that, my credit went down again. But one thing about having the resources and the credit education is you can always rebound from that and rebuild. I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. I chose the holistic route, and of course, insurance doesn't pay for that. And I found myself in extreme debt again. Here I am, have a successful credit education service, a successful credit education finance blog. And here I am going from a 730 credit score down to a 584 because I have now spent all of my money on holistic treatment and putting a huge burden on my credit cards to be able to afford treatment. And I felt really bad about that because I feel like, how could I be in this type of authority? How can I be an expert, but yet here I am at a 584? I had to allow myself grace and understand that I'm going through something. Like, this is a path that I'm going on, and I'm not going to be on it forever. If I die, I won't be on it at all. My health came first. My cancer tumors had disappeared, and I said, you know what, now I am going to come out of this pity party, and I'm going to focus back on paying down my credit card debt from medical debt that I had that was on my credit report. And I tackled it again. So I say all of that to say that there are going to be times that your credit may take a hit due to life events. But as long as you have the resources, you can come out of it.
So for any of the dreamers that are listening and they're interested in learning more about dropshipping, how do you suggest they get started? Can you maybe break it down into a few steps they can take to get the ball rolling?
Absolutely. Okay, so number one, pick a niche. Step one, pick a niche, because the riches are in the niches. We are never, never, never opening a general store. You do not want to compete with the Walmart and the Amazons. You cannot compete. You can't sell waist trainers and kitchen knives and lashes and bicycles in the same store. We're not doing that, because often in drop shipping, because you're not buying all this inventory beforehand, people think the more items I put in my store, the more chances I have to make money. Absolutely not. Stay away from that. Pick a niche. Number two, Shopify, Shopify, Shopify. Do not build a store in e-commerce on any other platform other than Shopify. Not WooCommerce, not WordPress, not Big Cartel, not Squarespace, not GoDaddy. I don't care who they are or what they told you. They lied. If it's not on Shopify, respectfully, it's wrong. So build your store on Shopify. Get your AliExpress and Overload together, and that's how you back in your store so that everything happens automatically. Your third step, you need to find a supplier. It is imperative that you find a reputable supplier that you can trust, that can deliver your products on time in the condition that you dictate for your business. Then you want to upload all your products and design your store. Shopify has millions of tutorials on this. This is not rocket science. Even if you don't know how to do it, you can outsource these things on Upwork, outsource them on Fiverr. It's not hard and it's not expensive. And then your last and most important step is market. You should be spending 50% of your time as a drop shipper on marketing. Nothing is more important than the marketing, because I see so many people build these incredible, beautiful websites, take the world's best photos, have all the pretty colors. Nobody knows your store exists. What are we doing all of this for? You have no customers because there's no brand awareness.
You said Shopify. Podcaster here.
I know, right?
So why Shopify?
Why iPhone?
That's the answer.
Right. Why iPhone? Because it's the best. Is this the conversation? Why a Lamborghini? Why is water wet? Because it just is. It's the best. Bottom line, it's designed for you to make money. Their only job on this planet is to teach you how to have the tools that you need to run a successful e-commerce business. They have got, I wish these people were paying me, because honest to God, it is just, and then the cost, like Shopify is $29 a month. You can run, let me be more clear. People do run billion-dollar e-commerce brands on $29 Shopify plans. Like, Fenty Beauty, Kylie Cosmetics, all of these great billion-dollar multi-platinum brands, Yeezy, The Gap, all of these brands. Yes, thank you. They didn't build their own from scratch platforms. They use Shopify because they are the best in the game.
So I took my third biggest risk. I did apply for jobs, but nothing materialized or anything. And this is just the time for me to just step out on faith and start my own company. Like, this must be a sign. I just thought about my career and everything that led up to this moment. I said, I am continuously building other folks' brand. I'm continuously making other people wealthy, right? So why don't I take that same initiative, drive, passion, hard work ethic, those same recipes, and put it within me, within my company. Let me grow my brand. And that's what I did. And so in 2017, probably the biggest risk of my career, which is leaving corporate America, leaving that cushy salary and expense account, going into the dangerous world and the unknown world of entrepreneurship. I made a promise to myself that I was not going to go back. This year probably be coming up on the 4th year, and I haven't gone back yet. It has been hard. It's been difficult. I'm definitely still navigating it. There's no amount of books, blogs, podcasts, anything that can prepare you for this entrepreneurship journey.
I'm getting close to my 2nd year anniversary. And similarly to you, I didn't start something on the side first. I left my cushy job and I just went all in. And I don't know that I would recommend that to anybody else, but I think that that's what I needed.
I agree. Yeah. I would recommend folks who do want to who are thinking about entrepreneurship or contemplating it, don't do entrepreneurship because that's the norm or that's what everyone is doing. Entrepreneurship is not made for everyone, right? You have to be self-motivated. You have to be a self-starter. You have to be willing to take risks. You are your own boss, but you also wear multiple hats. And not even that, with entrepreneurship, you don't become successful overnight. And I think it's a lot of misconceptions that I'm seeing a lot in social media where they're like, oh, you can get financial freedom, you can be your own boss. And I'm like, y'all need to tell these people the truth. Like, this is hard. You don't know when your next paycheck coming from. What if your client don't pay and then you the sales and marketing person, then you got to be the accounting person. That's a lot of work. And if you a solopreneur. So I just tell people, if you don't want to be an entrepreneur, it's fine. Like my brother, I will use him as an example because he doesn't want to be an entrepreneur. And there's nothing wrong with that. He's like, I'd rather be a CEO of another company as opposed to me starting my own. And so I tell people, it's okay. You have to go with your passion. So going back to your point, Anne-Lyse, if you are thinking about entrepreneurship, maybe while you have a full-time job, maybe do something on the side. And then once your side income surpasses your full-time income, then maybe you can have that conversation because you're putting, money aside. Because when you start working on your own, you don't know when your next paycheck is coming.
There is definitely a misconception out there that you just go out there and start making millions overnight.
Or people investing thousands of dollars thinking they're going to become a millionaire overnight. So it's two ways that you can either be successful, right? You either pay somebody to help you or you do it yourself. There's no in between. So if you're paying somebody, okay, if I pay $5,000 to get the secret sauce, even if they give you the secret sauce, you still have to do it. So literally you just invested $5,000 to get the secret sauce, but then what are you going to do with the secret sauce?
It doesn't replace the work.
Yeah, people come to me with the hotel stuff with that. I'm like, either I can help you connect the pieces or you can invest passively or you do the work. It's no in between. Either you do the work or you don't do the work.
Just to look at where you are today is just amazing. And I think it shows the power of just never giving up and trusting the process and leaning into your faith. I'm curious to hear how over the past decade, your philosophy about money has changed.
Oh, it's changed tremendously. When I was a young person, I'm first generation American. So I come from a very hardworking family and I come from people who value hard work, right? So it was like, work hard, work hard. That could mean have 7 jobs, or that could mean when you do have a job, you go early, you stay late, you do the most to prove that you are a good person and a good worker and all that stuff. And so I always equated making more money with working harder. And early in my life, that came at the sacrifice of everything else. I wasn't necessarily worried about health. I wasn't necessarily worried about relationships. Success was making money and it was working hard. And that's what I did. And I did it well. And it wasn't until that hospital stay, sometimes I think God has an interesting way of getting our attention, right? So I think the hospital stay was kind of like the pebble. It was like, hey, there's more to life than just like your work. So I had to focus on my health and my body and my spirit and all this stuff. And so as time has gone on, that's where the 6 pillars of wealth that I teach from now are. It's like over the last decade, I've just seen how much in my life changes and shifts when I'm focusing on the things that are not necessarily directly connected to money. When I've focused on my mental and my physical health, when I focus on my personal and professional relationships, when I focus on the space and the environment that I surround myself with, when I lean into my faith, there are so many financial principles connected with all these other areas of our life that we usually just dismiss in the name of chasing money. And not chasing money from like, you're this evil person who's greedy and wants more and more money. Chasing money can be like, you hoard everything. Like all you do is save and you don't know how to like enjoy your life. There's different levels, or some people are so consumed with paying off debt that they won't invest in themselves or do anything else. That's still a form of chasing money as well, right? I want to be sure that I define that for people, but my philosophy has changed so much because I see it as being more holistic. One of the things that happened to me in 2009 as well, I looked up a couple things. One was the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge was information. Wisdom was the application. We use them interchangeably, but they're not the same. We're information gatherers in our society. We love information. We will Google anything in a second, and we think that makes it like, oh, I know that. I know that. You have people in your family, they're always like, I know that. I knew that. I know. But they don't know how to apply it. Therefore, you don't have wisdom. Just because you have Google search, you don't really have wisdom, right? But also wealth. I was like, well, what is wealth really? And wealth, we have learned as a society, is money and material possessions. That's the very surface level definition. But when I was digging deeper, I found no, wealth, actually the 12th century original definition was the condition of well-being. And so I'm at a place in my life, and I have been for years now, that I don't measure my success based solely on what's in my bank account. I don't measure how I'm doing just by how much money I made this month. Like, I measure it based on, how are my relationships? How do I feel physically? How do I feel mentally? So I can have a lot of money in the bank, but if I allow my calendar to get chaotic, what does that have to do with anything? I don't feel wealthy. I don't feel wealthy at all. I feel hurried. I feel stressed. I feel rushed. I feel pressed. I feel like I'm going nuts. That has nothing to do with a number in the bank or assets or any of that. So I've learned to look at wealth from a more holistic perspective, and I keep those pillars in front of me so that when I'm feeling out of whack, I know what I need to lean into. Like, okay, your people pillar is off. That has nothing to do with what's in the bank account. If I know I haven't been on top of my date nights, I need to get on top of my date nights. Or if I know I haven't been spending that type of time with my daughter, I see where the disconnect is coming. And I think for me, the work that I do, it's amazing how we're just not taught a lot of this stuff early on. We're taught to like chase money. So we assume that that must be the goal, the end goal. And when I have that, I'll be fine. But look at how many people commit suicide who are wealthy.
A lot of entrepreneurs get so focused on making money, and they don't always remember that every single impression counts. And I know for me, I handled all my own customer service and email answering and DM for like probably 7 months. And it was extremely stressful. And I mean, luckily, well, not luckily, but I used to stay up all night responding to emails and DMs just to keep my customers happy. But I would have invested in a virtual assistant or someone much, much sooner had I really thought about, wow, I could have probably had 1.7 million in sales or 1.5 million in sales had I had a dedicated team of people who are filtering through DMs and emails and customer service inquiries constantly, because a lot of people want to talk to you first before they buy. And if you're not available, or if someone's not available to have a conversation and answer some product questions, or even just to answer back, some people just want an answer back, and that will make their whole day. That's a missed opportunity.
That's a great point. A lot of times we think we are kind of afraid of, are we going to be able to maintain this level of revenue? So we don't necessarily want to spend the money, but if you spend on, getting additional resources, you can make more money. It's just kind of like switching the mindset. I love that point.
Yeah, definitely got to switch the mindset. And, now I recognize not to be afraid of it because that money always comes back one way or another, either because that person makes more sales or on the back end, it ends up being a tax write-off when you hire someone or outsource work. It's still a benefit to your business, So I think people just have to shift and think about, instead of looking at the money you're quote unquote losing by hiring, you need to flip that thought and think about, okay, but what's the bigger amount of money I could be losing by leaving 10, 15, 20 emails and DMs unread for a week?
And so you said something about switching the mindset. And a lot of times when you, elevate professionally, there's a mindset shift that happens at some point. It's in the conversations that you have with people. It's even in the content that you consume. Can you talk to us about kind of like what you went through?
Yeah, definitely. It's a hard shift to make. It isn't easy. And I think anyone that's saying it's easy is not setting people up for what's to come. I found that I had to really beef up my confidence routine, my self-care routine. I had to become almost overly meticulous and organized because you'll burn out. And I knew I could burn out if I wasn't always reminding myself that I can do this. If you're not constantly believing in yourself, and if you don't set a routine to go by, because there are going to be days where you don't want to show up. And I know I've had them. There are days where I don't want to post, where I feel like I'm not equipped. I can't do it. What did I set myself up for? The mind goes through it all. So there are going to be days where you don't want to show up, but you have to put a system in place to where you don't have a choice but to show up. Even if you don't want to be there, I had to make sure my tasks were laid out so that I wasn't doing them because I wanted to. I was doing them because it was my job. So I think sometimes people think like, oh, entrepreneurship is so glamorous. And in some ways it is, because you can have a lot more freedom. There is no income cap, but don't decide to become an entrepreneur because you don't want to work a job, because it's a job.
And you'll probably work twice as much.
You're going to work twice as much. And the thing is, though, there's no boss to tell you, if you don't do it, this will happen. You have to tell yourself that if you don't do it, this will happen. And sometimes I think for a lot of people, that can be very hard, is to be your own accountability partner. So you have to be your own cheerleader. I had to learn how to pick myself up out of the dumps. And that forces you to create a routine, or at least have people on your speed dial list that you can call who can give you that boost when you need it, whether that's a friend, family. If you're religious, maybe it's one of your spiritual leaders. Like, you have to create like that type of team. So your business should have a team, but you also should have a team that gets you going on the days where you don't want to go. And you should have, your schedule almost laid out to where, even if you don't want to do it, like I said, these are the tasks that need to be done, and you just get it done. You might not like being an entrepreneur that day, but you know that in order to hit your numbers, these are non-negotiables.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Dreamers podcast. You can find the episode show notes and all of the links mentioned at dreamoflegacy.com. If you liked today's episode, here's what you can do to support me and help more dreamers discover the podcast. Follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Rate and review the podcast to help the podcast gain more visibility. Share the podcast with your family, friends, and coworkers. And if you really enjoyed today's episode, please take a second to tag me at thedreamers.podcast on Instagram and let me know what you liked about today's episode. All right, dreamers, that's it for today. I will see you back here next week for another episode of the Dreamers podcast.
Okay, dreamers, time to build this legacy.
This podcast is for general information purposes only. It is not intended to provide any tax, legal, financial planning, insurance, accounting, investment, or any other kind of professional advice or services. Please consult with an appropriate tax, financial, or legal professional to receive appropriate advice based on your situation.
Sunday, Skincare Day, is one of the ways I keep my sanity in these crazy times. DREAMER'S is an all-natural, Black-owned skincare brand carefully handcrafted by parents who could not find the proper care solutions to address their family skin problems. All DREAMER'S products are made of organic and high-quality ingredients, meticulously chosen to give your skin the smooth results and the glow it deserves.